Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Facebook Live. Today we decided to do Facebook Live out in the garden. After last week's little episode, we thought it would be nice to sit out here surrounded by nature. Unfortunately, the sounds of nature are being muffled by the sounds of weed whackers and car stereos. But hopefully we can bypass some of that and you'll still be able to hear us. Today I have a special guest. Her name is Monica, and she is our social worker here at Blue Water Hospice, and she is the social worker for the Blue Water Hospice Home. We have two social workers, Brianna Day, who works with the community hospice patients, and Monica, who works with the hospice home patients and families. And I think Monica does a wonderful job with our families and our patients, and she has a heart of compassion, and she has a special little subject here to bring today on mindfulness, and I think you might find it really helpful. So I'm going to turn it over to Monica.
So I wanted to chat with everyone about mindfulness today because it is a buzzword we hear a lot. It's a buzzword that you might hear a lot in a lot of different areas, but it's really been around for a very long time. And so I wanted to talk about it because we know that mindfulness can be used in a lot of different approaches to help alleviate depression, anxiety, grief. It can help with addictions. It can be used in different like weight loss programs, pain management, relationships, and so on. So a lot of the information I'm going to provide to you comes from my training, which was from a gal named Marsha Linehan, who uses mindfulness as a core component to a very comprehensive mental health treatment. So I'm going to use some of her materials because that's what I'm familiar with. But there's a lot of information about mindfulness out there, and check into it because there's just a lot of different things. But so I'm going to start with what is mindfulness. Mindfulness is a very complex idea, but if we were to break it down as simply as possible, it is all about being in the moment on purpose. It's intentionally living with awareness and in the present moment. It's really about waking up from autopilot. How often do we go through life on autopilot? There's times I drive places and don't remember how I got there, and we lose periods of time. That is what I'm talking about with autopilot. And so it's about being more present to our own lives. One of the key concepts with mindfulness is to do so, to be present, but without judgment. So it's letting go of evaluating. We don't want to label it as good or bad, right or wrong. We get into those absolutes, but when we're practicing mindfulness, it's just about letting go of that, not evaluating it, and but also not suppressing or blocking the moment that we're in. There's a lot of times that mindfulness isn't enjoyable because we might not like the moment we're in, and we might not like the things that we're noticing or observing, but being mindful and practicing mindfulness is all about just experiencing it without judgment. And it's also, when we're practicing mindfulness, it's without attachment to the moment. Have you ever been in one of those moments where you really like it and it's fun and it's enjoyable and you want to stay there forever? But we know that each moment, a new moment and experience comes. And so when we are being mindful, we're not attaching to the moments we like, and we're not avoiding the moments we really don't like, but we're just taking each one as it comes. There's a lot of times that we can avoid missing out, or we want to avoid missing out, because there's a lot of times that we can, if we're thinking so much about the past or we're worrying about the future and jumping ahead, we really miss out on the moment that we're in. And so we want to attend to each new moment as it comes. What I want to kind of say about mindfulness, though, is that it's a tool to help us live. This is not a prescription for happiness. You know, you can see some of those quirky little quotes floating around that talks about, you know, if you just breathe and all of these other things. And that's not what the true practice of mindfulness is. The true practice is just about being in the moment. And we want to view it, it's not a corrective plan, it's not going to fix anything, but it's more of a supportive practice. It helps to bring your attention to exactly what is, whether that's pain or bliss, mindfulness doesn't try to talk us out of anything, nor does it judge how we feel. It's just about being in that moment. So how do we do that? One of the first and most important things that we do when we're practicing mindfulness is observe. And when we're talking about observing, we can be observing what's going on in our body, and we could also be observing what's going on outside of our body. So as you might have observed when we started, there were some other sounds and different things happening, and you might still hear some of that in the background. But we observe and we use our senses. So we're talking about things we can see, smell, touch, taste, hear. When Sue did her talk about the garden last week, I thought that was a really nice opportunity when we talked about like the different flowers, and you can really focus on the smells and the dirt in your hand. You can really observe those things. When we're observing, that's also really about wordless watching. So we're not attaching anything to it. I talked about judgment a few minutes ago, but this is about not attaching words to it. We're not describing it yet or putting words on that experience. We're just noticing. And like I said, we can observe what's happening inside of us, like different body sensations. We can observe. So if we're thinking about what's going on inside of us, that could be our thoughts, our emotions, body sensations, or we can observe what's happening in our environment, like we've been doing. We had that experience. Yep. But what we want to do is really focus on controlling our attention, but not what we see. So again, it's pushing away nothing but clinging to nothing. My favorite analogy for this is having that Teflon mind, like a nonstick pan. So we just want the thoughts to come and go, slip right out of there, not sticking to it, not grabbing to it. We can also, when we're practicing mindfulness, after we observe something, we have to observe it first, but then we can describe it and put words on that. But this is where we want to use that non-judgmental language, just the facts. So, you know, it's kind of describing things as anyone would. It's very easy to attach judgment to things, whether that's identifying something as pretty, or it smells good, or it tastes good, you know, if we're using this sense of taste. But those are the judgments. And so try to, when you're describing, put more words on it. It's a little bit more work, but it really helps us focus and be in that moment. And the whole goal of mindfulness is to participate in life as it's happening. So it's throwing yourself completely into the moment, putting your attention into whatever you're doing right now, putting all of your focus there, and not separating yourself from what's going on in the moment. A couple points that I wanted to make sure I didn't miss, I tried to get everything kind of organized, so I touch on all of it, is that we want to, again, practice or attempt to practice mindfulness without judgment. Of course, it's important to discern helpful from harmful, by all means, but try not to evaluate what you're observing or what you're noticing or what you're doing, feeling, thinking, and so on as good or bad, right or wrong. We want to stay away from those judgments. Again, accepting each new moment as it comes. We can acknowledge our wishes, values, and emotional reactions, but try not to judge them, because those things might come up, especially if you might be observing something outside of your body. It's easy to have judgments about some of those things, but just notice them and then bring your attention back. Be completely present to this one moment and try to do one thing at a time. So whatever it is that you are doing to practice mindfulness, which we'll talk about some ideas in a minute, try to do just that one thing at a time. If you're spending time remembering, just remember. If you're looking at old photos and it's sparking those memories, just be in that moment. If you're worrying, worry. If you're walking, walk. Whatever you're doing, just do that one thing. Try to let go of distractions as much as possible. They're going to happen. Our brain's job is to generate thoughts, so we're going to keep thinking and have distractions, but try to notice them. And then if you get distracted by different thoughts, other actions, things happening around you, try to bring yourself back to the moment again and again and again, however often you need to. If you find that you are doing more than one thing at a time, stop and go back to doing just one thing at a time. It's tricky because mindfulness is the complete opposite of multitasking. We get taught by the world around us and society that multitasking is good, and it can be very useful, but when we're talking about being mindful and being fully present to the moment we're in, we can't be doing more than one thing at a time. So there's a time and a place. Not everyone's mindful all the time. That would be a really great way to live. But unfortunately, it's very hard to do so, and it takes a lot of practice. So we'll talk about some different ways that we can practice mindfulness. But the really cool thing is that it can be practiced anywhere, anytime, doing anything. Intentionally paying attention to the moment without judging it or holding on to it is all that we need to do. And so just some quick ideas about what mindfulness can be, and then I'm going to talk about some that we can do specifically related to grief. And so one of the things I want to make sure I touch on is that mindfulness is not meditation, but meditation can be mindfulness. So that's tricky, but a lot of people associate those things together. And so meditation can be a mindfulness practice, and you can do that sitting, standing, laying down quietly, and you can focus on different body sensations, thoughts, emotions, your breath. You can pay attention to whatever comes into your awareness. If that's a method that you would like to try to use, especially if you're a beginner, I would suggest YouTube. It's a really great resource, and you can find some really cool guided meditations. You can find some progressive muscle relaxations. Those would be words I would search for, and then you can find some that will walk you through that process, and it helps you kind of focus on the moment. Another spiritual practice of mindfulness can be prayer. And then there's mindful movement like yoga and martial arts, dancing, hiking, walking. So you can really do any mindfulness practice that appeals to you. I did a treatment where we would do lots of mindfulness multiple times a week, and you could be mindful coloring, you could be mindful listening to a song, you could be mindful in the quiet and listening to the sounds around you. Like out here, we hear right now it's the wind blowing and a little bit of yard work happening, but you can really pay attention to any of those things using your senses. But for a moment, I'm going to give us 3 ideas and talk about 3 things that we can do to practice mindfulness that may be particularly helpful through grief and loss. And so the first is going to be mindful breathing. The cool thing about mindful breathing is that our breath is something we always have with us. Mindful breathing, we're focusing on the breath as it enters and leaves the body. And you can do this by just really paying attention to the natural flow of your breath, or you can practice it by controlling your breath. And one of the things that I have taught folks a lot is to practice square breathing, where you would visualize a square, and as you're doing it, you would breathe in to the count of 4, pause for the count of 4, breathe out to the count of 4, and pause for the count of 4. And you can visualize that if that's helpful. Otherwise, you could just notice the natural rise and fall of the breath, and that's with us everywhere. So it's something easy to do anywhere that you're at. And so I have a couple little tidbits on how to start, but first you would want to pay attention to the rise and fall of your chest. You can feel the air in your nostrils, the warmth of your breath as it leaves your body. Your mind may and probably will occasionally wander to other things, and that's totally normal. When your mind wanders, acknowledge it without being hard on yourself. So again, all those non-judgmental statements I was making, and gently bring your attention back to just your breath. So that's a really great way to practice mindfulness. Another is mindful walking, and this can be really good because it also incorporates physical activity. And when you can do it outside, there's a lot of different things that we're incorporating here. Exercise is really helpful for those who are grieving or may tend to experience some symptoms of depression or sadness, or maybe feel isolated. A nature walk, if you can get outside and do so, gives us the opportunity to kind of reflect on nature, really pay attention to our surroundings, and kind of notice that natural cycle of life and death and the beauty built into everything around us. So if we were to practice mindful walking, ways we can do that would be, if possible, try to do so outside and spend maybe a minute or 2 standing in one place before you actually start walking. During that time, you can close your eyes and really just pay attention to the sounds, the smells, the feel. If today it's warm, and on one side I can feel the sun on one shoulder and I can feel the breeze on the other, and you can really pay attention to those things. You can feel your feet on the ground and really notice that, the wind in your face and so on, if you smell the flowers or the fresh cut grass. after you take a moment to do that, you can open your eyes and really start paying attention to the different sights and sounds, colors, shapes, everything kind of around us in nature. And if you're doing it inside, you can notice what's happening around you in your environment, the textures, different shapes, things like that. And then when you're ready to begin, start slowly walking and focus your attention as you feel your feet hit the ground. And as you walk, you can shift your attention from one sense to another. You can spend 2 blocks focusing on smells, a block focusing on sounds around you. And with practice, you won't have to set those kind of guidelines, but you can naturally alternate between your awareness and your different senses. It's really cool because you can really activate all of those senses when you're outside in nature. And so that's a really useful one. And then the third I want to just mention is loving kindness as a practice of mindfulness. And that involves self-talk. And that might seem a little bit strange, but remember, we're going to let go of judgments and just kind of take it as it is. And so loving kindness is especially helpful for people who struggle to find acceptance or maybe feel self-critical of their journey through grief, who maybe have judgments about thoughts or how they're feeling, or maybe think, gosh, I should be further along in this journey than I am, or I shouldn't feel this way, or I should just be over this. And so this exercise can be done to show loving kindness towards yourself, or it could be shown to using loving kindness towards a loved one that we maybe have lost. And so to start, you want to kind of create a mantra to recite to yourself, and you can do that silently or out loud, but it helps you move towards acceptance and accepting these words as true. So you can create your own mantra specific to any issue that you're dealing with or that you're struggling with. So examples of that could be, may I be happy, may I be peaceful, may I be free from suffering, may I be forgiving, may I trust the process, and may I have the courage to move forward. Those are just examples, but whatever kind of comes to your mind. And then you can use that as a formal meditation practice, or simply say it to yourself throughout the day. So these are also words of affirmation, really, truly. And so you can always have that in your mind's eye as you're practicing different types of mindfulness as well. I have a couple last thoughts as I kind of sped through a very lengthy idea here, but using mindfulness with grief is not intended by any means to diminish the pain associated with loss, but rather we want to acknowledge the pain and face it head on instead of running from it. It usually takes so much more energy to avoid a feeling and avoid painful experiences than it is to just allow ourselves to experience it. So you can begin your mindfulness practice today by just simply pausing to fully embrace one moment at a time. Some final words I want to share, because I thought this was perfect, is that you are here. Where you are is not perfect. It may or may not be okay, and here you are. You do not create your reality. Life will be what it will be. This is the life you are called to be present for. This is the moment that asks for your awareness, not because you're improved by what has happened, not because you needed it, not so you can turn it into some kind of gift. You are called to be present to it because it is what is, because it is here now, and so are you. So if you have other ideas or maybe ways that you practice mindfulness, I encourage you to share those with us in the comments. If it's something that you want to try, if it's something that you maybe are already practicing or you're willing to give a try, share that with us. We'd love to see, and certainly keep us posted. But that's kind of what we had to share with you today.
I think that Monica's subject was really very applicable to our situation here in hospice, both for our families and for our patients. I think the breathing exercise, sometimes for people that are going through, a health issue, I can imagine doing something like that when you are dealing with pain, or whether it be physical or emotional. Sometimes the anxiety builds up with the pain or the fear, and I could really see how that would be applicable. And then the loving kindness, I feel that, I know for myself personally, negative self-talk can be so destructive. And when you're going through, when you have a loved one that's sick, or dealing with the grief of somebody that you've lost, it's not a good feeling. It's not a place where you want to be. You want to get out of there, and it's easy to do a lot of negative self-talk and say, I hate this. I don't want to have to feel this way anymore. But to practice some of those exercises could certainly be very uplifting and constructive as you're going through the grief process. So I really appreciate you bringing that subject to us today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.